She watched an innocent man die because she stayed silent. And now, they're coming for her. The hanging happened on a Thursday morning, which was a strange day for an innocent man to die. Clara Birch watched it from the second-floor window of the Meridian Saloon, which she owned and operated, and had been running alone since her business partner walked out 18 months ago with half the cash drawer and all of her patience for trusting people. She watched because she couldn't look away, not because she wanted to see it, but because turning away felt like the last small cruelty she could withhold from the man standing on the platform below. His name was Pete Aldis. He was 23 years old. He had never, to Clara's certain knowledge, stolen the payroll money he'd been convicted of stealing. She knew this because she had seen who actually took it. She had seen it from this same window 4 months ago at 2 a.m, and she had made the catastrophic mistake of mentioning it to the wrong person. Since then, 2 things had happened. The wrong person had made it quietly clear that Clara's continued health depended on her continued silence, and Pete Aldis had been tried, convicted, and sentenced to hang. She had told herself for 4 months that there was nothing she could do. She was not sure she believed that anymore. What Clara did not know, watching from that window, was that someone else in Meridian was also watching the hanging and also did not believe Pete Aldis was guilty. Iron Wolf had been deputy sheriff of Meridian County for 2 years, long enough to know the town's rhythms, short enough that he still noticed things that longer residents had stopped seeing. He was Apache, which the town of Meridian tolerated in the particular way that useful people are tolerated. As long as he solved problems, his presence was acceptable. The moment he stopped being useful, he understood, the tolerance would evaporate. He had taken the job because it was work, and because he was practical, and because somewhere, in the 2 years he'd spent in Meridian, he had developed the inconvenient habit of actually caring whether justice was done. This was, he had come to understand, a professional liability. He had doubts about Pete Aldis from the beginning. The evidence was too clean. The witness testimony too consistent, not the natural inconsistency of people telling the truth from different angles, but the uniform consistency of people telling the same prepared story. He had brought his doubts to Sheriff Crane 3 weeks before the hanging. Sheriff Crane had listened carefully. Then he had said, with the measured patience of a man explaining something to someone he considered naive, "Son, the jury decided. That's how it works." Iron Wolf had left the sheriff's office with the specific feeling of a man who has been told, very politely, to stop looking. He had not stopped looking. The flood came 2 days after the hanging, the way catastrophes sometimes follow each other, as if the world, once it begins going wrong, finds a momentum. The Meridian River ran high every spring, but this year it ran higher. By Saturday evening, the lower district was under 2 feet of water and rising, and by Sunday morning, the rope bridge that connected the east bank, where most of the town's residents lived, to the main road west was in serious danger. It was in the chaos of the flood evacuation that Clara Birch made her second catastrophic mistake. She had been moving the saloon's cash box and ledgers to the upper floor when she found, wedged behind the false panel she used for keeping important documents, a letter she had forgotten she'd hidden. She had written it 4 months ago, the morning after she saw what she saw, before she'd been warned into silence. A detailed account, dated and signed, of exactly what she had witnessed at 2 a.m. outside the Meridian Bank. She had hidden it, and then been too frightened to do anything with it, and then, gradually, tried to forget it existed. She was reading it when the door to the saloon opened and Deputy Harlan Cole walked in. Cole was the wrong person, the one she had told, the one who had looked at her with flat, assessing eyes and explained very quietly what silence was worth to her continued operation of the Meridian Saloon. He looked at the letter in her hands. "Clara," he said. His voice was perfectly calm. "I think you need to give me that." She ran. It was not a plan. It was the oldest human response to the oldest human situation, a woman alone in a room with a dangerous man and a door behind her. She went through the door. She went down the back stairs into 6 inches of floodwater and kept moving. Cole was behind her within seconds. She had no clear destination. The town was half evacuated, the streets full of people moving furniture and livestock to high ground, the chaos of a flood swallowing individual urgency into general noise. She pushed through it, the letter clutched to her chest, the water rising to her knees as she moved toward the lower streets, which was the wrong direction, but Cole was between her and the right one. She rounded the corner of the livery stable and ran directly into Iron Wolf. He caught her by both arms before she fell. His eyes went from her face to Cole, coming around the corner 20 yards back, and something in his expression shifted, a rapid, silent calculation. "The letter," she gasped. There's a letter, it's evidence. Pete Aldis didn't." "I know," Iron Wolf said. She stared at him. "I have been waiting," he said quietly, "for someone else to know." Cole had stopped 10 yards away. He was looking at Iron Wolf with the careful assessment of a man recalculating his options. Cole was not afraid of Clara Birch. He was considerably more cautious about a deputy sheriff who had a reputation for being difficult to discourage. "Deputy," Cole said pleasantly, "this is a private matter between me and Miss Birch." "Miss Birch is a citizen of Meridian County," Iron Wolf said. "Private matters between citizens are my jurisdiction." A pause. The floodwater moved around their boots. Somewhere upstream, something large gave way with a sound like a slow crack. "You don't want to make this your business?" Cole said. The pleasantness had left his voice. "I already have," said Iron Wolf. "Subscribe to Wild West romance stories right now. You need to know what happens at that bridge." What happened at the bridge is the part Clara would never fully be able to describe afterward, not because she hadn't seen it clearly, but because the mind protects itself from certain kinds of clarity. Cole had people. That became apparent within the hour. 2 men who appeared from the evacuating crowd with the purposeful movement of men who had been waiting for a signal. Iron Wolf had seen them before they moved. She would think about that later, how he had already repositioned himself before she'd registered the threat. And what followed in the flooding streets of Meridian was not a fight so much as a desperate 3-way running problem through rising water and panicking townsfolk. They made the rope bridge because Iron Wolf knew a path through the lower streets that Cole's men didn't, and because Clara, whatever else she was not slow. They were halfway across when Cole's men reached the near bank. The bridge was already compromised, one anchor rope fraying, the planks shifting with the weight of the floodwater pushing against the supports below. "Keep moving," Iron Wolf said behind her. "Steady." The voice of a man who has decided not to panic and is holding to that decision by force of will. She kept moving. The anchor rope gave when they were 3/4 across. The bridge tilted, a violent, stomach-dropping lurch, and Clara grabbed the side rope and held on while the world went sideways and the brown water churned 15 feet below, and Iron Wolf's hand closed around her wrist. Not gripping, steadying. The same distinction she would think about for a long time afterward. They made the far bank. Cole's men did not follow. The letter reached the territorial judge in Santa Fe 12 days later, by which time the flood had receded and Meridian was assessing its damage, and Iron Wolf had filed a formal complaint against Deputy Cole that Sheriff Crane could not quietly make disappear, because Iron Wolf had been careful over 2 years to build relationships with people above Crane's authority. Pete Aldis was already dead. That fact did not change. That was the weight that didn't lift. But Cole was arrested, and Crane resigned under investigation. And the man who had actually taken the payroll money, a name Clara had also included in her letter, because if she was finally going to tell the truth, she was going to tell all of it, was brought back to Meridian in chains. It was not justice. Not quite. Justice would have been Pete Aldis alive. What it was, instead, was the closest thing available, which is sometimes all that's left. Clara found Iron Wolf on the evening after Cole's arrest, sitting on the steps of the sheriff's office, his office now, temporarily, while the county sorted out what came next. The river had gone back to its banks. The rope bridge was being rebuilt. The town smelled of mud and wet wood and the specific exhaustion of a place that has survived something. "You knew," she said, sitting down beside him, "before I ran into you. You already knew about Pete." "I suspected," he said. "Suspicion without evidence is just a feeling." "I had the evidence for 4 months." She said it without softening. "I was afraid. Yes, he said. Simply, not forgiving, not condemning, just acknowledging the truth of it. A man is dead because I was afraid. Iron Wolf was quiet for a moment. The evening light was long and flat on the wet street. A man is dead, he said carefully, because Cole was corrupt and Crane was complicit, and the system that was supposed to protect Pete Aldis failed him. You were one person, alone, with no power and a credible threat against you. He paused. I'm not saying you bear no responsibility, but I'm saying you are not the only one who does. Clara looked at him. She had been carrying the weight of those 4 months as a single personal failure, and she had not, until this moment, heard anyone distribute it differently. It did not make the weight disappear, but it made it possible to breathe. What happens to you now? She asked. Crane's people, they won't make this easy for you. No, he agreed. You could leave. Go somewhere that doesn't already have an opinion about you. He looked out at the street, at the town that tolerated him precisely as long as he was useful, and which had now watched him bring down its sheriff. I could, he said. A pause. Do you want to? Clara asked. Iron Wolf considered the question with the same unhurried attention he gave to everything. I want, he said, to see whether this town is worth staying for. He glanced at her. That question is not yet answered. Clara Birch looked at the man beside her, who had held her wrist on a failing bridge and known, 2 years before she did, that something was wrong in Meridian. And she thought about 4 months of silence and 1 moment of courage, and the strange, costly shape of doing the right thing too late, and whether too late was the same as never. I make the best coffee in the county, she said, and my saloon will be open tomorrow morning. Something shifted in his expression, not quite a smile. That, he said, is relevant information. The sun went down over Meridian. The river ran quiet where it was always supposed to run, and 2 people sat on the steps of an office that still needed a proper sheriff in a town that still needed deciding about and did not yet know what they were to each other, only that the question felt, for the first time in a long time, worth asking. Like this video if Clara's 4 months of silence hit different. Subscribe for new stories every week, Wild West romance stories. Comment. Was Iron Wolf right about where the responsibility actually lies? Epilogue. 18 months later. The new sheriff of Meridian County was elected in the fall of 1872. The vote was not close. People in Meridian still had opinions naturally about the Apache sheriff and the saloon owner who had become, somewhere between a flooding river and a failed bridge, the kind of steady presence that a town rebuilding itself needed. People in small towns always have opinions. Iron Wolf had learned, over 18 months, to care about exactly as many of those opinions as Clara did, which was to say, almost none. What he cared about, the work. The town, which was turning out, slowly with setbacks, the way real things always turn, to be worth staying for. The coffee, which was indeed the best in the county. The woman who had stood at a window for 4 months carrying something unbearable and had finally, at the last possible moment, run. He understood running. He had done it himself for years in a different direction. He understood better stopping. Clara kept the letter, the original, in the false panel behind the saloon documents. She didn't know exactly why. Pete Aldis was gone, the case was closed, the letter had done what it needed to do. But some things you keep. Not to remember the failure, to remember the moment you stopped letting it define you. She kept it for that.